Okay, here we go. Okay, we want to look a little bit at how Christianity changed the world. And this has come out of a book by Schmidt. His last name was Schmidt, on the very same title, How Christianity Changed the World. And I have that book in my library. I'm trying to think of his first name, but anyway, I think it's Alvin Schmidt, Schmidt. So we can tell the fruits of a worldview. Ideas have consequences. When we look at the Judeo-Christian West, why do we see civilizations that people want to get into, not out of? Why do Muslims come here? Why do African people come here? Why do people try to flee to Europe from the war-torn African nations and Islamic nations? Well, because there's something here. And what's here really comes from Christianity. So let's take a look at some of these things. We, first of all, need to learn about our own history, and we need to learn about history. Christians no longer know the literature, history, and philosophy that made the West the civilization is today. And that is the fact. That's true. Christianity is the root and foundation of Western civilization. You need to know that. And in fact, there's a great Eastern Christian writer, Vishal Manglavadi, who wrote a book called The Book That Made Your World. And he has really done an amazing job to point out that so much of the world has been shaped by the Bible, including India. Okay, one of the things that early on, as Christianity began after the death of Jesus Christ in the Roman Empire, the early Christians began to demonstrate that human life had value. They would not follow the Roman idea of the arena or throwing away sick babies. They began to speak that suicide was not honorable, and it was viewed as noble by the Stoics, the philosophers. They did not endorse abortion. Infanticide, the Romans were just child killers and abandoned children that were sick or not wanted. And they began to address this situation. They opposed human sacrifices, and they showed that ordinary people matter, not just, you know, the rich or the powerful in society. They began to teach that all humans had dignity because God loved us. They also supported a committed nuclear family in the sense of a father and a mother and children, not polygamy, not many mistresses, as was often done by the Romans, or big orgies. And, you know, the family structure was not the biblical one. They had an emphasis on relieving suffering. It was not seen necessarily as part of fate. They elevated sexual morality. Christianity exalted heterosexual monogamous love over and against pedophilia, which was very common, and homosexuality in these civilizations of the Romans and the Greeks. They made family life important. They made it a calling or a vocation to run a family. They brought in the notion of romantic love as a basis for marriage, not just a contract, buying a slave woman or marrying because of position or power, that there had to be love in there. They introduced consent on the part of both the man and the woman as a prerequisite. You know, you just don't grab someone out of the marketplace, you know, take her off. So these are all changes. They proclaimed freedom and dignity for women. Women had a low status in ancient Greek and Rome, and their status was elevated under Christianity because, remember, Jesus had women followers. In fact, he honored women. By the first people to see the empty tomb was women. And this is, if you think about that, this was unheard of, to have women in those positions and have authoritative statements from them back in those days. The early church welcomed women. The idea of human equality was founded on the Christian idea that all souls are equal on the end of the day. We're not going to take anything with us. We're all equal. Widows were honored. They weren't burned alive like in Hinduism. Believed in bridal freedom, freedom to choose a husband. And missionaries helped abolish Chinese foot binding, mainly of girls, in 1912, where their feet were tied up so that they would look small and tiny, and crippling many girls. And Western countries now ban female circumcision, which is common in Islam. Still happens in Islamic countries. Even some people who've come to Canada, some migrants, have been charged with this assault on girls. Charity and compassion were a main feature of Christian activity in early in the Roman Empire. I'm following this verse from Matthew 25, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. There was a Christian spirit of mutual love and community charity. Widows were helped, orphans, the aged. This astonished pagans and the Romans, who thought, what are you doing? These old people, just chuck them out. There was an emphasis on a relief of suffering and compassion, helping the needy, even in distant lands. We think of Mother Teresa, how she went to India, an Albanian nun, Catholic nun, going to a Hindu country to pick up beggars dying of leprosy in Calcutta. Now, why were there so many beggars on the streets? Because of the caste system. The wealthy don't help the beggars of the low caste. But here goes a Catholic nun over there to pick up beggars, give them a bath, and most of them died in her these missionary places she established. What was it called? The Mothers of Charity. Can't remember. Mother Teresa, and can't remember the name of their ministry. But anyway, totally demonstrating that people had value, even sick people, even poor people. This was a challenge to Hinduism. And when she died, when Mother Teresa died, she was given a state funeral by India. Now just imagine this, India is a Hindu-dominated nation. They were saying, by giving her a state funeral, this is the highest model that we see. This is one of the highest models of human activity and behavior that we would like to see, which really contradicted Hinduism, because she was helping the lowest of the low. So that's an amazing. An Albanian Catholic nun got the highest honor India could give for her work. And many relief organizations, the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, Little Brothers, YMCA, St. Vincent de Paul, these charity and compassion organizations came out of the biblical worldview. And now we're thinking about the USA and this idea of charity and compassion. Gunnar Myrdal in 1940 said, no country has so many cheerful givers as America. America is a generous, generous nation. It comes out of this idea of being a Christian neighbor, neighborliness. This is a really old statistic. In 1991, $650 per household was given in America, average. 98, 24 billion was given by Americans to all different charities and organizations. They started 500 different rescue missions, and 750 Protestant mission agencies give $2 billion annually. And one of them, the United Way, gave $3.58 billion to help overseas situations with the poor and needy. And they also helped establish child labor laws. You think of these children working in the coal mines overseas, or in the markets or brick kilns in India or Africa. These labor laws protecting children largely came out of America and the West. I just brought up a couple of World Vision links. World Vision, a great organization that helps, and I just was looking at some of their activities, and have a look at this. They address child trafficking. So World Vision just doesn't build wells. They have a whole website here, you can see it, on how they attempt to fight child trafficking. Another one, child sex tourism. So this is fantastic for Christian organizations, not just to go over there and give people food, but fight some of the moral crime and evil going on in the world. They also address child labor and child soldiers around the world. So this is fabulous to think that Christianity is impacting the world in so many different areas, not just food. And I like Ephesians 5:11, and do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but expose them. So this World Vision is exposing child trafficking, child sex tourism, child labor, and child soldiers. It's wonderful. It's all part of making the truth clear to people and shining a light in the dark corner. Hospitals and healthcare, also really part of the Judeo-Christian foundation in many countries. Based on the verse from Matthew 5:36, I was sick and you looked after me. The Romans were very cruel and had contempt for sick people as undeserving. In Nicaea 325 AD, the bishops established a hospice in every city that had a cathedral. So just think of that, 325 years after Christ, the bishops of the church decided any place that had a cathedral had to have a hospice to help the sick. Amazing. Many today have Christian names: St. John's Hospital, St. Luke's Hospital, Methodist Hospital, Lutheran Hospital. You go to Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world, the best hospitals are private. They are the Catholics and the Lutherans. Mental institutions. Of course, we wouldn't call it mental today. We'd call it intellectually handicapped or intellectually challenged, but they established these. They made a big imprint on education, thinking of the Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Monasteries were the center of learning in Europe for the acquisition, preservation, and transmission of knowledge. And don't forget, the first universities in the world started in Italy and Paris in 1051, I think it was, were started by monasteries. So learning, studying, understanding the world we live in, this was the Judeo-Christian mandate, and universities became launched as places to study all truths. Well, here we go. Started in the 12th century, and the word university comes from uni veritas, to unify knowledge and truth under God. By 1932, 92% of all US universities were founded by Christian denominations. Just think of that. 92% of all the universities were founded by Christian denominations. Churches built elementary schools, then secondary schools. I think Greg's from Australia. Greg, how many Catholic and Anglican churches are there just in the city of, or schools, sorry, Catholic and Anglican schools that exist in the city of Canberra? Lots and lots. And some of the best schools, and I've taught in some of them there, were the Catholic schools. Francis Bacon, through the God-given power of discovery, man could fulfill the dominion mandate. Bacon considered the founder of the scientific method. So here's where the Bible contributed to the advancement of science. And so we see here that the scientific method launched an explosion of innovations and inventions: the water wheel, the windmill, eyeglasses, mechanical clock. The Reformation then also established that believers had authority, not just the priests. Kindergarten. Friedrich Froebel decided to start something called kindergarten because he believed that children should be taught at a young age. Sunday schools for the poor were started by Robert Rakes in 1780. Education for the deaf. Charles Michel de l'Épée was a priest who started the first sign language school in Paris in 1775. There was education for the blind. Louis IX in the 13th century established a hospice in Paris. Science truly does have Christian connections. And we're going to see this from the disciplines that have been launched by scientists who were believers. Based on the Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. So let's look at this here. Science actually rests on Christian assumptions because the universe is rational, not enchanted. It's not God. It's not part of us. So we can look with our minds at it and learn. Science arose in Christian Europe, placing an importance on reason to understand the ways of God in creation. How did he do it? What did he do? and to discover that the universe operates according to ordered laws, that it was comprehensible to the human mind and accessible. So we think of Isaac Newton, Boyle, Kepler, Leonardo da Vinci, Christians, believers who studied God's creation, believing that they could discern something of the mind and intention of God. So here are some scientific disciplines established by Bible-believing scientists. I'm going to list them so you can just marvel at them. You just think of how many have ever bought a bottle of Listerine? Well, you know where it came from? And Joseph Lister, who taught that we needed to kill germs, there were germs that were causing infection. This is a major revelation that caused them to start using antiseptic before they just cut somebody open. But here's a few, have a look at some of these. Bacteriology, Louis Pasteur. So you think of pasteurized milk today to get rid of the bacteria in cow's milk. Calculus, Isaac Newton. Celestial mechanics, Johann Kepler. Chemistry, Robert Boyle. Comparative anatomy, George Cuvier. Computer science, Charles Babbage. Dimensional analysis. I don't even know what dimensional analysis is, but good on him. Lord Rayleigh did a good job there. Dynamics. Dynamics, Isaac Newton. Electrodynamics, James Maxwell. Electromagnetics, Michael Faraday. Electronics, Ambrose Fleming. Energetics, I don't know what that is either, but oh, Kelvin. Who got the Kelvin chart? Kelvin is degree measurement of temperature. Here's some more. Entomology of living insects, field theory, fluid mechanics, galactic astronomy, gas dynamics, genetics, glacial geology, gynecology, hydraulics, hydrography, hydrostatics, ichthyology, isotopic chemistry. These are all believers who established or contributed to the founding of these study areas and disciplines. Model analysis. Let's keep going. Natural history, non-Euclidean geometry, oceanography, optical mineralogy, paleontology, pathology, or we use that one today, physical astronomy, reversible thermodynamics, statistical thermodynamics, stratigraphy. Oh, I don't know that. Oh, look, Nicholas Steno. Is that after stenography? I don't know. Could be. Stenography might come from him. Systematic biology, thermodynamics, thermokinetics, vertebrate paleontology. So here's notable inventions, discoveries, or developments by creationist believers. Absolute temperature scale, Lord Kelvin. Actuarial tables, barometer, biogenesis law, calculating machine, chloroform, classification system, double stars, electric generator, electric motor, ephemeris tables, fermentation control, galvanometer. So huge contribution to the development of the West and the world. Global star catalog, inert gases, kaleidoscope, law of gravity, mine safety lamp. That sounds like an important one. Pasteurization, reflecting telescope, scientific method, self-induction, telegraph, thermionic valve, transatlantic cable, vaccination and immunization. So that's quite a few there to think about, that Christianity has contributed to the development, an amazing development of the scientific discoveries of the West and the world. God said, you shall be a blessing, and through you, in Genesis 12, he said, through you, all the nations of the world will be blessed. So just think of that coming forth, the fruit of these people's lives and the blessing that has come to the earth through their activities. We need to let the world know, when we're talking about Christianity, that this is also a fruit of Christianity. And give them the full story of why they live in such a beautiful nation. Politics. I'm going to just go for a few more minutes here. In politics, they separated or disentangled the spheres of religion and the government. This is not the case in the Muslim countries to this day. The mosque runs the government. The imam runs the government in Iran and Iraq. Even though they might have a democracy, it is the religious people that run things. And even so in Indonesia, you have Islamic government. They remove people who or prevent people who are Christians from getting up high into government. In Malaysia, you can only be in levels of government if you're a Muslim. They have discrimination against non-Muslims. We don't have that. We allow anybody to run for government. And we have a separation that the church is not the government, and the government cannot control the church. We don't have a state church. And the central government must stay out of theology. Of course, that doesn't stop them in China, which is a communist country. It doesn't stop them, in the state church in Sweden, where they tell the pastors what to speak in some cases. Thomas Jefferson endorsed that. He was the principal author of the U.S. Constitution, the third president of the United States. In an 1802 letter to the Danbury Baptists, he said there should be a wall of separation between the church and state. Now, notice he did not say Christians should not be in government. That would have been ludicrous. He said the separation is between the institution of the state and the institution of the church. Had nothing to do with Christians couldn't be in government. Most of them were. It means that the church could not run the government, and there would be no law made by the state that promoted a single religion as a state religion. There would be no law to promote or discourage any religious belief. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution stated, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That is the separation of church and state in America. It is not the fact that Christians shouldn't have a contribution as a Christian to any level of government. It's that government, Congress, will make no laws that promote one religion over another or prohibit anyone from practicing. Article 4 says there shall be no religious test ever required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. That is the separation of church and state. You make no prejudice against anybody running for government. So you're going to have no religious test. Anybody who's religious can run. So the U.S. under President Adams said this, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. The reason being that the U.S. government was established to give people maximum freedom under God to do the right thing. Freedom to do the right thing. There was a definition. So freedom was possible if people did the right thing. That's why he said this is only going to work if you have a moral and religious people who do not require a lot of government to keep them in control and to behave properly. We want minimum government, so we need maximum moral responsibility. That's what they said. Well, now you've got so many Christians not involved and so many atheists running parts of the country that you have the breakdown of these nations because they are requiring more and more and more government and police and monitoring to control the corruption and evil going on in the nation. But the first original plan was to have minimum government, maximum moral responsibility in the people. They also promoted the rule of law. The rule of law is something that countries around the world today are begging for. They want the rule of law because they have the rule of corrupt courts, corrupt governments. The law is what the president of President Mugabe says, of what Kim Jong-il states. It is the rule of law must judge the government and the people equally. This idea of the separation of powers to bring checks and balances was another wonderful idea. Political and social accountability, servant leadership. Leaders should be judged by how well they respond to the concerns and the welfare of their people. This is huge when you think of some of the despots in Africa. They don't care about the poverty of their people. They're multimillionaires who've taken millions of dollars overseas into bank accounts. They live like kings. They're not helping their people develop. That's not what the West preaches. In fact, they don't pay their leaders very much compared to businessmen. I think, the Prime Minister of Canada or Australia might only make 200,000 a year, or say 250,000 a year. Do you know how much an executive of a telephone company or an electrical company or a railroad company or any of these major companies makes, or ferries in Canada? They get $1 million bonuses on top of their multi-million-dollar salaries, even when the ferry company is losing money. So we don't pay our leaders a lot, and that's because we want people who are going into that position to serve the people. They're not doing it for the money. And a just war doctrine was also promoted. You can't just go to war because you don't like somebody. There has to be a just and right cause. I got it. Just a couple minutes. The idea of limited government. The ruler's realm has limits beyond which he must not go. The ruler cannot arbitrarily force the population to do what he wants. Again, this is the reason the West is so much better than the Islamic world. And there's a concept of a legitimate government. This is an illegitimate government if they're just doing evil. They're just taking our money. They're providing no services. Sounds like some of the Western governments we have today in Australia and Canada. Oops, better not say that. No one should be subject to torture or inhuman punishment. You just think of how many countries are torturing their prisoners. You don't want to be in jail in some countries. Okay, so I think what we'll do is I will stop here before we get to Canada's constitution, except to say one thing. I've got to say it now. You saw my slide. Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God. This is a statement out of the Canada's constitution. I repeat, Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God. And the purpose of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is to protect rights and the freedoms of the people against the government. Right? That is something that Canada has in its founding documents. So just remember that next time. And just think of this scripture verse here. Righteousness makes a nation great, exalts a nation. But sin is a disgrace to any people. So this has motivated people in Western countries to get into politics because they saw unrighteousness and they believe that God's blessing will come upon them, the nation, when they do what's right. And the sinful behavior is a disgrace to the nation and to God. So these are the Bible has motivated people politically since the very beginning of the church. And we need to realize that the West owes so much of its structure, institutions, values, policies, laws, direction upon the Judeo-Christian worldview. So thank you for your time. We are going to stop here. Let's get back to my